Coming up on episode 8 of The Good, The Bad, The Teskey, Andrew Bogusch of Sirius Satellite Radio joins me to talk the latest in the NFL. We talk Tim Tebow, Ben Roethlisberger's shoulder injury, Ed Reed's contract issues, as well as Maurice Jones-Drew. All that and more coming up on The Good, The Bad, The Teskey. So I am pleased to be joined by Andrew Bogusch of Sirius Satellite Radio. And Andrew, I guess we'll start off with some football here. I've been watching the Olympics a little bit, but my native Canada hasn't been racking up as many medals as the U.S., so I'm starting to get a little less interested in the Olympics and focusing on football as training camp has opened up. And all this talk right now seems to be around Tim Tebow as camp has opened up. And what do you think about Tebowmania in New York City right now?
Well, I think two things. I think it's borderline ridiculous, the amount of coverage that the Jets are getting right now, and even, I guess, the Broncos to a slightly lesser extent. I mean, that's the only, if you turn on the TV here in the States, ESPN in particular, you'd think that there are only two teams in the NFL, in Denver and the Jets, because that's all who they are showing you right now. I mean, there's somebody live on a set at Jet training camp every day on ESPN. The amount of just every media from local to national that's there is just insane. And if I'm the Jets, I'm trying to limit that as much as possible because I still think that this is a very fragile situation, and I think Tebowmania is very, very real. You know, Tim doesn't necessarily foster it. He's not out there asking you to be so strongly behind him. He just has this natural draw to him, and he is this huge story, whether he likes it or not, whether the Jets like it or not, and I think it does have some effect on a team. I think Tim does have the ability to win football games at times, but I also think that, again, not of his own direct doing, he can be a distraction when everyone's there asking questions about Tim Tebow and wanting to know what Tim Tebow can do. I think it can turn sour. So if I was the Jets, I'd want to limit things as much as possible. So maybe that comes here soon, but it better because it's a lot. It's overwhelming for me as an outsider, so I can't even imagine what it's like being a Jet right now.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Because, I mean, Tebow, I think when I first heard the trade when he got traded to the Jets, I thought that'd be the perfect thing to push Mark Sanchez and make him compete and maybe earn his starting role and take it more seriously than he did last year. But now I'm seeing training camp open up, and there was a big story the other day on Tebow running around training camp with his shirt off, and it just seems like it's too much of a distraction right now, and all the attention seems to be on him and not any other player in that Jets locker room right now. And I think that's why Santonio Holmes earlier said that this two-quarterback system, especially with Tim Tebow, wouldn't work. But do you think maybe long-term during the year, Tebow is going to get some reps and be effective for the New York Jets in their offense?
Well, see, and that's the tough part of about this for me because I actually do think that Tim can be a serviceable NFL player in the role the Jets want to use him, and I think he'd be good in this change-of-pace quarterback, running the football, maybe even catching it. I think that's right now what he is best at. I don't think he can be your starting quarterback every single play for 16 weeks. I just don't think that's where his game is just yet. I think he's so far from that you couldn't put him out there as a starter and hope that he would progress and learn along the way of a full season. So I think what the Jets want to do with him is the way he should be used. I just don't think the Jets are the right team to do it because I just don't trust that Sanchez can handle all of this pressure directly from Tim and from everyone on the outside. Now, so again, they may figure out the right way to use him and he may excel in this role, but so much about this dynamic right now is mental and not physical, not on the football field. So I kind of trust Tony Sparano. He invented, so to speak, this Wildcat, and they ran it pretty well in Miami with Ronnie Brown and Ricky Williams, so I think Tony can figure out a way to use Tim at his best. But, then when you use Tim and he's successful, that only adds to the Tim Tebow love and the calls for Tebow to play, which then how does that affect Sanchez? So, when I start to think about it positively, Colin, I end up at a negative here, and I just don't know that this is going to end the way the Jets want it to end.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to end up well for the Jets. I think Mark Sanchez is going to feel, even if he is the starter and Tebow comes in for maybe 10 snaps, whether it be returning punts or whether it be just on third down conversions and stuff like that, I think people are going to like Tebow more because he's more in the media. He's a well-respected guy, and Sanchez might feel that he's not getting enough attention or enough love from Jets fans that Tebow gets. Do you think that's going to play a factor?
Yeah, I do, and because the Jets made this obvious. Now, first of all, whenever you want to have any kind of second quarterback play a role, that's an immediate knock on the first guy, because the Patriots, the Giants, the Saints, the Packers, anybody with an elite quarterback would never ever think about using somebody like Tim Tebow. But the Jets are because they have some concerns about Mark Sanchez. Now, and I think that was even furthered by the way they began this offseason, doing everything they could to say how good he was and how much behind him he was, and new contracts and extensions and whatnot. So they seem to be progressing and acting as if they were worried about Sanchez's psyche, and then they go and bring in a psyche killer in Tim Tebow. So, Mark, I think, I don't want to say he's fragile mentally, but certainly from what we've seen the last year plus, I think he hears what is said about him on the outside. And so my initial reaction to this whole thing is that he's not going to respond to this the way that they hope he does. He might, and he may prove me wrong, but I do think that this is going to bother Mark Sanchez.
Yeah, I think it definitely will as well, because he's playing in New York where football is so under the microscope. So I don't think it's going to be a good thing for Mark Sanchez. This could really build tension in that locker room. Another locker room that has a little bit of tension right now is Pittsburgh, where we learned that Ben Roethlisberger has a shoulder tear. How do you think that's going to affect his play going into the first week of the season?
I don't get this with Ben. It must be part of his MO. He must, some guys, they all have different ways to get themselves in the right frame of mind to play, and apparently Ben likes us knowing that he's not 100% physically, because more than anybody else in the NFL, maybe let alone just quarterbacks, he will tell you when he's hurt. So, on one hand, I don't think it's a big deal that he says it. I think it's just part of him getting him ready to play. But this is not a broken nose or even a twisted ankle. It's his rotator cuff. And there are things you can't play through. And that, to me, is on the list of things you can't play through. So it might be small, it might be minor right now, but that's the last thing I want to hear him say is, I have a rotator cuff problem, because if that goes, that surgery, that's an awful recovery and a long absence. So this one certainly bears watching. It may be nothing, and it may be Ben just trying to, again, liking the idea that people think he's hurt. But if it's anything more than that, the Steelers certainly are in big trouble.
Yeah, I don't really know why he let the media know that he had a shoulder tear, because he's 30 years old now. And you think about the Steelers' offensive line right now, their right side has a rookie there. He's been sacked more than any other quarterback. Do you think this is just one of those things where it's not good to let other teams know that you're hurt, because he is one sack away from potentially ending his season?
Yeah, I don't know how much, especially, teams are going to all of a sudden go and attack the shoulder. They're going to come and get him no matter what, because that's what you should do against any real good quarterback. And I don't know that it really matters inside the locker room, because I'm assuming guys are thinking the same thing that most of us are, is that, Ben just likes to tell you that he's not feeling 100%. So I don't know that necessarily has kind of angered anybody, or is going to lead to other teams going even further to hit him and knock him down. So the concern for me is just simply the medical concern of is how small actually is this, and can he make it worse? Because if it gets any worse with your rotator cuff, again, those are major problems.
Yeah, and it's one of those injuries, too, that can linger, right? So if you injure it now and it's just a small tear, later on it could lead to bigger, more severe injuries and stuff like that. So I have to wonder if his health is going to be 100%, and if he can play through it, too, because it's on his throwing hand as well. So you have to wonder if he's going to be able to put up good numbers this year for the Steelers, who are expected to take that AFC North title this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been kind of having this internal debate, because it's kind of almost scientific fact right now that there's going to be at least 5 new teams in the playoffs year to year. So when I sit down and try and project based off of that, kind of long-standing history now, somebody that's who I think is pretty good has to come out to make one of those 5 openings. And when I first just sat down and went through the AFC, I immediately put Pittsburgh and Baltimore in, because I just think they're that good. But then I got to thinking that maybe one of those teams is one of those teams that opens up a spot for somebody new. And so then I started thinking, who of the two is more